Hey everybody and welcome back to Noise in a Book. My name is Dawn and today I'm going to be reviewing The Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. This book was lent to me by my friend Valentine, who I mentioned in my first video. I really liked this book. It uses a lot of metaphor and a lot of semiotics and symbolism, which is amazing for me. I've always found that I really like books that use universal symbols and that have little riddles for you to tear apart and figure out what the author was trying to say with this. This book was really interesting for me because I don't read a lot of Eastern literature, and Murakami is, I believe, Japanese. Yeah, Japanese. So this was a lot of fun for me. The translation was a little bit difficult, and I think it's just because of how the language translates into English. I don't know. I'm sure this translator is very good at their job. But that made it a little bit slow to read. The plot line was fantastic, and the symbols that he uses was amazing. When I first read it and I first finished it, I was at 4 stars. I loved it. I wanted to run out and buy this book and read it again immediately. But as time passed, it became more of a 3-star. I'm really glad I read it and I loved it, but I don't think I'm going to read it again for a little while. And I think I would like to read more of his stuff and more Eastern literature before I come back to it. Also, it wasn't life-changing. It was just very interesting and very good and had a very fantastic story. I loved how it switched back and forth between a very sci-fi feel and a very fantasy feel because the author is working a lot with right brain, left brain operations and the storage of memory and what makes us who we are, and that was a lot of fun for me. I get the feeling it takes place in a near future, not a far future. When it comes to sci-fi, this is definitely a very near future. He talks about Bob Dylan, he talks about Lauren Bacall, the main character in Hard-Boiled Wonderland. Essentially, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World are two different stories. You have Hard-Boiled Wonderland, which is sci-fi and is about this guy who stores information in his brain. His brain was altered. He is a semiotech, it's his job, and he's hired for his services by this kind of crazy scientist who finds animal skulls very fascinating, and he's kind of an interesting guy too. End of the World is about this man that moves into this town that's very isolated. It's very fantasy, it has unicorns, it has a little bit of magic. My two favorite genres are sci-fi and fantasy, and I got both in this, and I loved it. And I also felt both stories felt different, even though they connect, even though they're very integrated together and interwoven. The two stories felt very different. They read very differently. One read as fantasy and one read as sci-fi, and I was very thrilled with that. They're my favorite genres. The change in pacing with this book came from flipping back and forth between the two stories. I felt that the pacing in Hard-Boiled Wonderland was very much the same throughout, and the pacing in End of the World was very much the same throughout, until, like, the very end, like the last 2 or 3 chapters. I really liked how when I read this book, because you're flipping back and forth between the two stories, you're getting a lot of what it's like to switch back and forth between right brain and left brain. The two stories are different enough that I really felt at one point I was looking at things very critically, and at a different point I was looking at things very fantastically. I really thought it was an interesting way to switch up the pacing and to keep things new and fresh throughout the course of the book. Someday I would really like to go back into the book after I've done a lot more research on Eastern symbology and read more Eastern literature. Right now I feel like I don't have the tools to fully enjoy this book. This book very might well be bumped back up to the 4 stars upon second reading. I saw Climb the Stacks review another book by this author, and the reason she said she has a hard time with a lot of his literature is that his characters are very hopeless, and I don't know if it's because I have mild depression, but I really do know what that hopelessness feels like, and it was really refreshing for me to read about a character that is the same way, that goes through life without much hope. I'm talking about Hard-Boiled Wonderland. The main character from End of the World very much seemed to have a lot of hope, and was always working to make his situation better and to figure everything out. But the main character in Hard-Boiled Wonderland didn't have much, and I felt it very refreshing. I really liked this new point of view. If you're a big sci-fi fantasy fan and you're looking to maybe pick up some Eastern literature, I think this is a great starter. I'm really glad I started with this book. So that is my review of Haruki Murakami's The Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. I hope you enjoyed it. I am next going to be reading Black Like Me, which I'm very excited for. It's a pretty small book. It shouldn't take me too long to read. I'll probably have another review next week. And I'll post a video either Wednesday night or Thursday. That video is going to be about why I study literary theory in my free time. I hope you have a fantastic week, and I will see you next time I am on... Well, I won't see you, but you'll see me next time I'm on YouTube. Thanks for reading, and have a great day. Stop.